Hello, and welcome to Against the Odds. I'm Jan Powell, and in this podcast, I'm asking some extraordinary people what made them winners when the odds were stacked against them, and how did they overcome those life-changing obstacles, and what have they learned along the way. All our guests have been affected directly or indirectly by HIV/AIDS, and we'll be finding out about the challenges they've faced and what inspires them to strive for what they believe in.
Don't be perfect, just be you. It was something that I took on when I first accepted myself. So it's been my mantra. It's a huge part of me. It's like, regardless of anything, against all odds, no matter what, just embrace yourself. Don't be perfect, but just be yourself.
That was the extraordinary DeLovie Kwagala, award-winning photographer, artist, and fighter for social justice. DeLovie identifies as non-binary and grew up in Uganda, a country that still outlaws homosexuality. Their story is one of isolation, abuse, and discrimination. But despite that, joy and creativity too. DeLovie has found a voice through the camera lens with a portfolio of striking and award-winning images exploring identity, belonging, and gender. In 2021, DeLovie won the East African Photography Award and has completed assignments for media including The Washington Post, The Guardian, and Time magazine, to name but a few. DeLovie has today found a level of security in Johannesburg, where we talked about some of the extraordinary challenges that they faced and overcome. Resilience is perhaps an overused word, but DeLovie has it in spades. Dee, I'm really excited to be talking to you today, and this is audio, so it's going to be a bit tricky because I really wanted to talk about your work because it's so central to who you are and what you've achieved. And I'd like to really begin by asking you what it was that attracted you to photography. What is it about that medium that means so much to you?
I chose photography because I didn't feel like I had any plan B. And I think also it just came to me, honestly. It was a time where I was really struggling to find work. And I finally got a job to be a hotel host. And these people kind of required me to be feminine, and it just happened so that I just couldn't tone it down, and they ended up sending a manager to shop with me so I can get the right attires that kind of fit their normal, the formal way of doing things. And I stayed at that job for 2 months, and it just felt like I was selling my soul to the devil. I was so immensely depressed, and it just felt like I wasn't myself. And so in that moment, I remember that I had a camera that I had bought while I was working in Dubai as a barista at Starbucks. And from that moment, because of all the anger and the rage and the injustice and the oppression that I felt at that place, and them trying to change me so much, and even through that, it just felt like I was never enough for them, And so in that moment, I decided that I would never work for anyone. And so I self-taught photography, and within that, I found my voice. I just felt like when I held the camera, and I just wanted to let out whatever rage that I had, and, kind of rebel for the first time in my life.
There's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to look at some of those things in some detail. And I wanted to talk about one of your collections, the first set of photos of yours that I looked at. And it's a series called I'm Not My Trauma. You spent time with 15 young women who'd suffered abuse at the hands of Barry Glazer, a German national who'd operated a home for girls and young women on the island, on an island in Lake Victoria. And it took a very long time for him to be brought to trial. And there is one particular picture that I find completely stunning. It shows a girl curled up in almost a fetal position on a giant leaf against a very natural background. It's vulnerable, but very beautiful. Can you tell me more about that photo and how that came into being?
So I guess I'll start from the moment, so I'm a sexual abuse survivor myself. I was molested as a child from the age of 5 up until I was 10. And so through obviously the photography medium, I had always wanted to tell the story of this experience in a sense, but also like in a way to relate to somehow, because I never spoke up until I was 21. And so I wanted to kind of like, tell a story in a way, like encourage people to speak up that are going through this. And with this project, it's just so happened that like I somehow, I don't even know how like this came to be, but like, as I said, like it came to me and it just felt like, it was the right moment to. And so how I approached it was I sat with the girls a couple times. I visited them without my camera to kind of like create a bond and trust. And some of them wrote down what they were feeling in the moment, like of what the experience had made them feel. And so that's how I was able to implement the project in a sense, like, because I wanted it to not be stigmatizing and victimizing as like the ones that had been done before. And I wanted it to be so relatable and also like show the resilience from these women. In that particular image, she told me that she always felt like she was surrounded by all of these people. Obviously they were in a shelter together and they just couldn't talk to each other about what was happening because each one of them kind of felt like that was a secret that they had to keep because that's what Glazer told them. And so she says she often felt like, she was alone in a room full of people, and that's what I tried to imitate in the photograph that you're speaking of. Yeah.
I think your stories have almost a documentary quality, but they're not in the conventional sense because they're also very artistic. They're very aesthetic, if you like. Is that something you feel? Is that deliberate, the way you see the world?
I would say yes, but also because I'm self-taught, and so I wanted to come in with my own trademark and my own style of photographing and telling my stories because it kind of brings dignity, to the participants that I work with on these stories because they're often so sensitive and so heavy that like you need to improvise in the ways that you articulate them.
So let's go back to your childhood, DeLovie, because I think that's where we really get your first against the odds story. You had a really tough start in life, as you've intimated earlier. Your parents separated when you were very young, and then you and your sister were stolen, kidnapped even, from school by your father. And it was from then on that your life got really difficult. Would you like to tell us, what that was like? What happened?
I never really saw my parents together. And growing up, I knew that we had to go in between places. My mom was living in Kampala, which is the central part of Uganda. And then my dad stayed, I think, an hour away. And he married. We didn't know that he married, but we only found out when we were stolen. I don't know, I've never really thought about it as a kidnap. But one day at school, our dad came through, and because he's our dad and the school kind of knew him, so they just kind of let him, and he took us without letting our mother know, but he said that he had told her. And we were young. I was 5, my sister was 7. And off we went. He introduced us to this woman as our auntie. And aunties, in my language, the local, we called her Senga. Senga is an interpretation of your dad's sister. And so we grew up calling this woman, obviously, we grew up calling this woman Senga. And even when we knew that it wasn't actually the truth, we just went with it because we had been used to it. And I think that that was the start of a lot of traumatic events in my life because this woman literally hated me she literally did everything that she could to make my life hell. As a baby, I didn't know anything at that age, and there was abuse, physical, mentally, There was also obviously starvation, because I remember coming back. At some point, my sister somehow went back home. I don't know why I ended up staying. And I remember going to school several times and coming back home and to no food, but like with dirty dishes to wash. And often I remember that like I often ate food from my neighbors. They could feed me because they saw that I was always hungry. Like, yeah, I don't know. That was a very, very, very tough experience in my life, but also at the same time, because of my father used to work away from home, so he could only be back on the weekends. And because also my stepmom didn't really like me, so she often left me alone. And this is when a relative decided to take advantage and started molesting me. And I guess it's can be called a constant rape, because it just kind of like took place like every chance he could get. But honestly, also like I've blocked a lot out of my memories, because it's just so hard to look back at, and it was so isolating. It was lonely, and I never thought that I could speak up to anyone, because I didn't know if it was a wrong thing or bad thing. And yeah.
You're describing a situation that's so abusive, and it's full of rejection and isolation. How did you find the strength to get through it? The young person that you've turned in today, that really is against the odds, that despite all that, you have turned into somebody who's achieving and who's found a way of expressing yourself. Where do you think that strength came from?
I don't know, honestly. I feel like from a young age, when you've experienced that, you seem to get like coping mechanisms on how you can survive. It's a survival mechanism, to be honest. I feel like I didn't have anyone to talk to.
You did it and you came through it, and it's an extraordinary story. And as you grew, that sense of being an outsider, that sense of being an outcast, you've said continued. You began to understand your own identity. Was that a gradual process? Was that something that was affected by those early years of being an outsider at home?
I would say yes and no. Again, I feel like growing up, I never really received any love. And I don't blame any of my parents, because honestly, if they have told me their stories, and they never received love either, so they didn't know how to love me any better than they gave, which was nothing, you know. And so obviously I grew up in church, and I was an avid churchgoer. At one point I was in a choir, and it's called the Sunday school choir, like where kids kind of like, you know, get together, sing songs, be a part of the ministry, but not really. And so all of the things that they used to talk about, it was like constantly a reminder of like, you know, homosexuality being a taboo. And I remember there was a favorite story, like the Sodom and Gomorrah story from the Bible. And it just literally like, you know, it just somehow coincidentally just felt like it was showing up every Sunday or every other Sunday. And so like I grew up around people saying that, like, you know, thinking otherwise is a taboo. And so growing up as a different child, so I didn't mention, but like within my childhood, I got into a lot of trouble because I just never learned like anyone else, and no one understood it. And so my mom always had to tell me that, like, why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you do things like your sister? Why can't you, you know, like grasp things that I teach you the way your sister does, you know? And I guess also that rooted a strong sense of rejection within my life, because it just felt like no one could have me, you know? And I just had this looming thing of rejection around me. And obviously, when I started feeling like I was attracted to girls, I just fought it. I literally took tooth and nail. I'm like, no, I can't be gay. I can't. I literally can't be those people. Like, ew, that's disgusting. Like, I'm a church goer. Like, I'm a Christian, right? And how do I then turn around and say, like, I'm feeling something for other girls? And, like, honestly, I didn't even know the term for it. I just knew there was a feeling, because by then we didn't have internet, and, like, again, as I said, the only information I knew about this was the fact that they talk about it in the Bible, where everyone was banned, right? And in Uganda at the moment, you can't really just openly speak about homosexuality, because, either on television or radio, because they term it as recruitment. Like, you're trying to recruit, like, young people into the trend, but it's not what it is. So in those moments, obviously there was no one to talk to. There was no one to relate to. There was nothing as representation. There was nothing. So I was on to myself, and, like, it took me the longest years fighting that. And I had the terriblest, I don't even know if that's a word, but, like, the terrible of teen years. I never had any friends. I never played with anyone. And I think also, like, because of the molestation, it just kept me away and gave me a lot of trust issues from actually talking to people. I never thought that people could actually love me for who I am, or be friends with me without wanting something in return, because that's how it felt like growing up.
No, so a huge amount of guilt, a huge amount of uncertainty, a huge amount of isolation going on there.
And shame.
That must have been such a tough time. And shame, guilt and shame.
Yeah.
It's clear how that is fed into the way that you express yourself today. Uganda has very repressive policies around homosexuality. How has that impacted your life?
It was super hard, and it's still hard even to this day, to the extent, like, it's not just the laws, but also the community. How dare you show up different from the norm? How dare you show up a certain way, breaking the norms of the society and the culture and the tradition? Like, how dare you? And in the quest of fighting this, I fasted, I prayed, I literally went to overnights on Fridays and slept in church, trying to get rid of, like, this demon that was in me, like, I think, like, the funny thing is that I learned English at 9 years old. Like, literally, I had been studying in a local school, like, all the way before, and there was teaching, I think, in Uganda. I don't even remember, but, like, I remember that, like, we went through a phase when I was 9 or 10, where if you spoke vernacular, which is the local dialect, Uganda, they gave you a bone to wear, a bone necklace, like, literally made out of real bones, animal bones, dead animal bones, and you had to wear that thing, as stinky as it was, around your neck. And you see anyone else speaking Luganda, then you give it to them. And that's how I learned English. And from then on, I just started, like, reading a lot, like, every novel that I could get. I remember I was sucking my thumb, and all the time I could literally spend the whole day sucking my thumb and not talk to anyone until I knew that I was speaking the right sentence of English, literally.
So it was punishment for speaking vernacular language. You had to wear this token of shame and try and get rid of it to somebody else who was speaking that language. Is that how it worked?
Yes, and then at the end of the day, every single person who had held, like, this thing around their neck was punished, like, beaten in front of, like, everyone. Like, at the end of the day, before we went home, we held a parade, and, like, they would parade us in front of the whole school and, like, beat us before we went home as a punishment. So I guess, like, I'm telling this story because, like, it's relating to a lot of, like, the guilt and shame that I thought, like, growing up. And I think because of the society's pressure to be normal, I ended up going and dating a man, because I'm like, okay, I literally, like, can't be otherwise, so I'm just gonna go and, like, do this. I remember I was 17, and honestly, from that moment, it just never felt right. Like, it was excruciatingly condescending. And I remember, like, doing like the performative sex because this person wanted it. It was never because I wanted it. And I mean, I was 17 and this guy was 27, and so there was already a power dynamic. But like, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to do that, because even how that came about is because I was interested in music, and he was a producer. And I just wanted to kind of like, be recording music, but I didn't have money. So I was like, I was forced in a way to kind of cultivate this relationship.
So it was power relationship and an experiment from your perspective, which failed pretty quickly. But you have a daughter.
Yeah, it actually, like, it took a year, and then within that I got pregnant. I actually have a son, and he's 8 right now. And from that moment on, I was like, okay, like, look, this has happened. It is what it is. We can't really turn back time. And so I was like, from then on, I'm not ever gonna settle for anything less than what I deserve, because I need to be myself. I need to like, own my sexuality and own myself and forgive myself for like what I thought was a reconciliation, within myself, and like the fight that I had about that. I wanted to let go of that and believed and fully accepted that I was a lesbian, because that's how I identified back in the day. At the moment, obviously, there's been some evolution, there's been growth, there's been learning, and I've come to believe that I'm non-binary now, and I'm non-binary queer. But like, also, I guess I didn't mention like this relationship, which came with a child, was in South Sudan, because I went there at 17 because I needed to work and kind of take care of my family, because times were really tough and my mom was really struggling. She had lost her business. And so that happened in Juba. And 2 months after I had given birth, so literally, like, I told this person that I gave birth, and they said, good for you. And that was it. I never really had anything from them again. And so when I gave birth all by myself, I ended up like sleeping on floors because I didn't have anyone, I didn't have anything. And I slept on concrete, literally, like, and in churches for all of the time that I was pregnant, until I gave birth. And my child never really had any, when kids are gonna be born and there's like all these things, shopping and stuff, I didn't have any of that. I remember a friend of mine had bought some clothes to send to his 2-year-old who was in Kenya by then. And for some reason there was delays, and so he just gave me that bag, and that was the only clothes my child ever had until he was 3 years old.
That brings us really to your second against the odds story, the moment when, I mean, so much of your life has been a struggle. But at 19 years old, there you were in South Sudan with your 2-month-old baby, and then there was war in South Sudan, and you escaped that. Can you tell me about that? How you managed to do that and get away safely?
Sorry, I'm laughing because it's just like, it just sounds so unreal. But a friend of mine who was hosting me at some point in my pregnancy, like, invited us to go to church. By then I had like a small place that I lived in, and what I used to do was wash people's clothes, to be able to get like milk and Pampers for my child. And so one time she's like, yeah, let's go to church, like, it's been a long time, and the baby was 2 months old. I remember the date very vividly. It was a Sunday, and it was December 13th, 2013. In the we woke up on the Monday, and everyone was calling us and being like, hey, are you guys okay? Like, what, like, there's a war going on. And we're like, what? It was like one of the things in movies, right? And we had left home, my little house, with my child, literally with one bag, because we had gone to spend a night. We went to church, And then we had gone to spend a night at my friend's. And so when that broke down, we were like scraping around the place. Where we stayed, where we had spent the night, there's like like not a barracks, a police barracks. So we kind of like every time we were there, we kind of had gotten used to like them cocking their guns and stuff. And so we didn't think that it was anything different. And after that, we actually like started panicking, and my friend is like, yo, I'm leaving, I'm going back to Uganda right now because I'm not dying here. And then she's like, yeah, but I'm not leaving you guys here. And I'm like, but we don't have any money, we left everything of ours in the house. And like, yo, you have a child and I'm not leaving you here. And so we took refuge at the police behind us, but because we're foreigners, we were like, what if they turn on us and start like, hitting us? And so we were like, okay, we're going to go. There was a church that was nearby, a little distance, but a bit near. And so we decided to go to the church and take refuge. And I remember like carrying my child, like like kangaroos, right? Where like they have to keep their babies under their berries. And I did that. And like we had to go really low because there was gunshots and like being fired from every direction. And there was stray bullets that were flying all around the area. And so we had to literally crawl down on concrete with literally like a child, a baby, just to get to safety of the church. And getting to church, we witnessed that there was like a lot of like bloody people that were being brought up in the church, being carried, like who had been wounded. And outside we could see like all these like big mamba cars, like taking soldiers and like passing around the church. And it was really, sorry, I stopped myself from swearing, but like, it was really, really scary. It's just like I was petrified. I was terrified. Everything in me was like, please, let's just make it. Many people didn't make it out, but we did. And that was miraculous, to be honest.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was HIV, because not only did Uganda have very oppressive policies about homosexuality, but it also had oppressive policies about HIV too, isn't it? At one point, if you were HIV positive, that in itself was a crime. I mean, did you know people who were HIV positive? How did they cope with that? Could they get access to drugs? I mean, did that just simply make it even more of a stigma, even more of an issue of survival?
So in the moments, like people who had contracted HIV, they didn't speak up. My mom has been living with HIV for, I think, like a couple years now, like more than a decade. And I remember her just telling me just a couple years ago, and coming out and being like, yes, you saw that I've been quite sick, back and forth. Because we had near moments of like death, from her sickness, and we never knew what it was, and she could never tell us. And I think also like within this time, everyone it took them at least like more than 4 years to finally test. Many people ended up dying, but I was so lucky that like my mom wasn't one of those. And by the time she came out to really say that she had been like, I had to like beg her to take medicine, to take the ARVs, because even within that time, she was like, yeah, there's no way in hell I'm going to go stand in those lines in the community hospital where everyone knows me and they know, that I'm HIV positive. Like that is traumatic, because of the stigma that was happening. And I literally had to send her to like different meetings, like different resources, and being like, hey, these people have been going through this and they're, taking their ARVs and they're okay. Like, I really don't want to lose you. And we need to like really get on the medicine and stuff. There was like a lot of counseling that was involved. And I guess within that time also, like, I think 2 years later, literally my dad never really said anything until one time they called me and told me that he was dying in the house, and I had to send for him to come to the hospital. And when he got there, he was like really skinny. His blood count was really, really low, and he was literally like days away from death. And I had to literally like, convince him to start taking his medicine. So literally I have two people in my life that two people that are really meaningful to me that are affected by this. And like the early years weren't the easiest thing. And even now, like, there's still a lot of fear. There's still a lot of stigma. There's still a lot of discrimination, even when there's organizations that are come forth to combat the stigma and make the medicine easy and accessible. But still, there's a lot of corruption in Uganda. So in most cases, people in the rural areas, they still don't get access to this because obviously, I don't know where it goes wrong, whether the government supplies the free meds and the clinics kind of like steal them or sell them or whatever happens. But like there's still a very much lack of saturation when it comes to ARVs, and the miscommunication is still deeply in the rural areas. Yeah.
But from what you say, it's not just access to the drugs, it's the sort of personal internalization of the shame of coming out to admit that you've got this virus, and that you simply still don't want to show that. You're still ashamed of it. I mean, that is just awful in this day and age. Have you been able to persuade them? You must spend a lot of time trying to persuade them that it's okay, that it's just a virus.
It's taken, it's been a fight, to be honest, because if it's in your house, you really, really try everything that you can to make sure that they have the sensitization and the information that they need to be able to still, stay with us, live longer, because it's possible, right? And this is when I got really involved in the sensitization, because I joined forces with, I was working with, together with PINA Uganda, which is an organization to help combat, obviously HIV/AIDS, the stigma and child abuse and all of these sensitive topics. And so within that, we are holding like counseling sessions and connecting my parents and obviously other people within the community to people that they can talk to. Yes, it took a lot of convincing, because my mom used to, there's like I don't even know what it's called, but like she used to buy like 1 liter of like this herbal thing that they swore would literally heal and kill the virus. And so
what is it? You say a herbal thing. What does it mean? It's like a kind of a local medicine, or what is it?
Yeah, so it's local medicine, like herbal, as in like it's plant, it's plant,
okay,
plant-based, right? So they join a bit of like concoctions and stuff, and like, make it, cook it and make it into a liquid. And so they sell that in 1 liter or 5 liters. Like she could buy like 5 liters for a whole month and drink that like in the morning and the evening, and she would swear, be like, yeah, I'm okay, I feel good. But at the same time, when she goes to the hospital, they're like, your blood count is really, really low. And I had to be like, Mom, honestly, there's no shame in this. HIV doesn't kill anymore. Like, you can really live longer with it. Like, please. One time she got really, really, really sick, like bedridden sick. And at that point, there was no going back, because I'm like, Mom, I can't really lose you, You still have other kids that you have to take care of, like. And so it happened so that like now she's actually also like an advocate, like helping with people to speak up within the community and stuff. My dad is also on meds and is doing really, really better. So yeah.
Let's go back to your photographic career, Dee, because it's the thing that's really developing at the moment. You were recently awarded the East African Photography Award for a story about intimate partner violence called Through the Cracks. Is that right?
Yes.
And you are the first queer photographer telling a queer story to win this award. Can you tell me more about that story and what it means to you? This is your latest work, is that right?
Yes. This particular, so I have won a couple awards, obviously internationally, and but this one really hit home, because with the homophobia that is in East Africa, and like, in most countries in East Africa, it is like a huge success and like one for the books, like it's literal history. Because I remember when I first applied to these awards, I was working on a body of work called The Kingdom, which is an imaginary world where, like, there's no male or female. Boys can wear dresses and pink and flowers and makeup, It's a fantasy world because that's what most of my friends, trans friends in Uganda wanted to be, and we just never had that outlet.
It's also a very joyful world, isn't it? It's so full of color and fun. I mean, some of your work is really heavy and the subject matter is really tough. But this one, it's beautiful, it's bright, it's full of joy.
Yeah, because I wanted to kind of like celebrate the bravery, of those of us that were still, in the fight to be ourselves, to, that we're still trying to show up authentically, because I never had representation and I needed to see that. I needed to inspire other baby gays, baby queers, wherever they are, that like, there's a hope, and also like the main aim was honestly to normalize the indifferences, that like the society kind of tends to put on us, so that like when someone sees my work and they see a boy in a dress and with makeup, that like, it kind of like, it is an image that stays with you, especially when you don't usually see that. And so like that is in a way, like when you see a person in real life, you will see, oh, there's a relatability. There's like, oh, I've seen that before, so it's not like a shock of like, oh, mob justice. And so yes, so this award, as I said, like, it was one for the books. It's history because I'm the first openly non-binary queer photographer and activist in the whole of Uganda, if not the only queer photographer in the whole of Uganda, And so I was saying, as the moment, the first time I applied to this award, I literally shied away from showing my queendom work because I didn't know how they were going to perceive it, because I'm like, yo, this is still Uganda, right? And there's this thing where like many institutions and organizations, like, shy away from getting involved or being involved, or with these projects because it's so sensitive and like, they don't want to lose their licenses or be associated to the gays. And so like that obviously like made me shy away from like sharing my queer work in the beginning. But then the second time around, I'm like, okay, fuck this. I'm literally just gonna go in and like, this is what I've created. It's a body of work that is very intimate and close to my heart because I have suffered at the hands of like partners before, And I didn't want that story to stay untold. I wanted to tell the story because in the moments where I was being abused by my ex-partner, I didn't have anyone to talk to. These are important stories. Like people need to know that like we need to act now on these issues as well and give them as much attention as they give like the heterosexual issues as well in the sense, right? And I wanted to highlight that there is a problem, that we need to act on within the community as well and even on the outside. And so it was like a very massive win.
It's amazing. It's an absolutely amazing win. I mean, does that also indicate change happening in Uganda? Is the fact that your story could win like that so publicly? Do you think that things are improving there?
Not at all. Not at all. Unfortunately, not at all. Yeah, because again, like when I recount the things or like the harassment and the prejudice and the oppression that I've suffered at the hands of these laws, like the illegality of homosexuality, I got my camera confiscated, I got threatened, I got harassed, I've been groped in public, being questioned if I'm a man or a woman. And I had to move places like many times because there was like, danger, like there was like issue of safety and stuff. And it's still not changing because recently a friend of mine, like a person from the community, was gunned down, and also like there's still many cases of raiding, shelters, and parading people, treating them like animals, like parading them through communities, like on ropes, taking them to jail because they're homosexuals. It's still not changing, but at least it gives me hope that our stories are getting somewhere. And maybe this change or these people like us who are on the ground and others who are doing the work to make sure that like we leave a legacy. But like there's a bit of hope, I see, honestly. But like it's not in the government, it's within the people ourselves, because there's a lot of more acceptance and, you know, relatability, I would say. Yeah. A sense of community.
You've got an 8-year-old child growing up in a very different world from your childhood. Are you optimistic for them? Do you feel that you can offer what they need to grow up in freedom?
I mean, honestly, I feel like here we can openly talk about queer issues without having to censor, because I remember being in Uganda and like I was dating my partner for 2 years and I was staying with my child, and I could never tell him that, like, you know, this is my lover, you know what I mean? Because I was so afraid that like he would go off to school and tell another child, and then that would escalate everything, you know? And so that really pained me to live in that idea of lies. It just felt like you're living a fake life in a sense, right? But here I feel like we can openly talk about that. I feel like, you know, I've been able to teach him more about like the way things are, and like be open about like, you know, okay, like, you know, maybe I have a girlfriend or whatever, right? And just be open about that. But at the same time, South Africa is also like not the queer heaven that I expected, you know, because within the first month of me being here, there was 32 recorded murders, you know, within community. And these are things that are not spoken about. When you're not a part of the community here, it's easy to miss these things, but it's happening. As an activist, I've found myself in courthouses, you know, listening to these cases, and most of them, they just like, you know, literally go under the drain just like that. There's no justice served, you know, at all. And I feel like, yes, at the moment we are here, but it's not the ideal place that I would really want to raise my child in. And honestly, I keep saying that, like, I'll go wherever the wind takes me in the search for freedom, to be able to experience freedom, like at its, you know, like at its beam. I don't know if that's even a reality, but that's what I want for me and my child. I want to feel free. I want to be able to relax a bit and not watch my back. I mean, honestly, we can't really compare the two countries, right?
There's a saying which I've seen, I think on one of your social media feeds. It's, don't be perfect, be yourself. Is that something that means a lot to you?
Oh, yeah. Don't be perfect, just be you. Yeah, I have been using this hashtag for, I think 6 years now. Even before I started photographing, even before anything, it was something that I took on when I first accepted myself. So it's been my mantra. It's been, you know, it's a huge part of me. It's like, regardless of anything, against all odds, you know, no matter what, just embrace yourself. Don't be perfect, but just be yourself. And it's powerful in its way. And I feel like I've held onto it, like on many, many occasions where I haven't been able to fully be myself, but I had to remind myself that I don't have to be perfect. All I have to do is show up as myself, and many people will reject me, but at the same time, accepting yourself is like the first satisfying and fulfilling act that you can ever give to yourself.
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, it works on so many levels. I was thinking, you know, I've got a 7-year-old godchild who's very dear to me. I think it's the sort of thing that I would like to say to her, that as you're approaching your life, as you're growing up, just remember that you haven't got to be perfect. You've got to be true to yourself. I think it's a great mantra.
Thank you. It means a lot to me.
You've had so many moments in your life when you've been up against it. Is there one that stands out for you? Is there one particular thing that stands out for you from those against the odds moments? And is there something that you've learned from that you take forward in your life?
So obviously, as I've grown and evolved, I don't want to be like, I don't want to center trauma to be like the trauma porn of being like, oh, if I didn't go through those circumstances, I wouldn't be here, because it's kind of like glorifying pain and trauma, that you have to go through the things to become powerful or successful. But the reality is, you know, like it is, I have been able to come out stronger and wiser and, you know, like more ambitious and But at the same time, I'm taking forward my, like circumstances and making them become my strength, because we can never really heal from trauma. It's you process it and you learn to live with it without letting it affect you. But I choose to let mine be my strength to carry forward, because I keep telling myself that, like, if I survive that, I can still survive whatever is there to come. Like, life is not a smooth path, and no one has ever handed me a silver plate, and I've had to kind of like remind myself that I have to work hard, like 10 times harder, because I don't have a plan B. I can't fall back on anyone. It is the message that I'm trying to give my child as well. So I think through the things that I've gone through, I'm strong. I can do it. If others can, I can, and I'll do it even better. I don't know, but like, it keeps me moving to know that, like, I'm here now, and that's powerful in itself.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. Anybody who hasn't seen your work, really go to your website, check it out. There are some fantastic images, some fantastic stories there. DeLovie, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Against the Odds. You can find more information and links in the podcast notes on unaids.org/podcasts. Do please share and subscribe to this podcast, as it really helps us reach our growing audience. The podcast is presented by me, Jan Powell. The senior producer for UNAIDS is Charlotte Sector. Original music by Ken Nikravesh and Hugo Powell. Against the Odds is made by Powell Media for UNAIDS.